As you probably recall, Barbara Walters spent many years doing some of her best work at ABC News, where she worked with some other pretty familiar names like correspondent Sam Donaldson and our longtime contributor, Ted Koppel. We decided to ask Ted to help us reminisce.
Before the break, you heard Jane's lovely tribute to Barbara Walters. It should come as no surprise to you, though, that when three of Barbara's old friends, Jane and Sam Donaldson and Ted Koppel, get together to share some reminiscences, that those will have, let's say, a somewhat earthier quality to them. So, for example, Barbara's competitiveness.
Oh, yes. 92, I booked President Bush, Governor Clinton, and Ross Perot, the three contestants, for the last broadcast that we had before the election day. I thought I'd booked Ross Perot, but his people called back and said, "I'm sorry, you can't do it." I said, "Why?" They said, because Barbara Walters got wind of it and reminded him very forcefully that he had promised her the next big interview he did. Oh, I said to her later, "Barbara, well, I thought we were friends." She said, "Yes, we're friends, but I needed that interview. I get them all." And she did.
I don't know if you guys were trying to get the Monica Lewinsky interview, but I certainly was on it, and that was not going to happen.
I don't want to get too personal, but whenever I say I don't want to get too personal, but then you know it's...
Well, I'm out of here.
74 million people watched her interview. I think that 74 million people would not have watched the Jane Pauley Monica Lewinsky interview.
Monica, are you still in love with Bill Clinton?
No.
Sure?
Mm-hmm.
Over?
Sometimes I have warm feelings, sometimes I'm proud of him still, and sometimes I hate his guts, and he makes me sick.
Barbara came up through the school of hard knocks. When she began on the Today Show, things could hardly have been much tougher for her.
Later, when I left the club, the doorman asked if I wasn't taking off early. Well, I replied very grandly, "After all, I'm not a bunny. I'm a reporter for the National Broadcasting Company."
I enjoyed seeing you as a bunny. I did. We have a station break now.
I did an interview with Barbara way back in 2004. Here's how she remembered those early days on the Today Show.
Some high points. When I was first on the Today Show, I was hired as a writer. I was only allowed to write for the women. The big breakthrough was when I could write for the men.
Barbara Walters is in our Detroit studio with two guests this morning.
There was a man named Frank McGee. I was not allowed to ask a hard news question until he had already asked 3.
Barbara did extremely well on the Today Show, so well, in fact, that ABC came and offered her the job of anchor of the evening news at $1 million a year. Now, she would have been the first woman in the United States to anchor a national news broadcast, and that $1 million salary made her the highest paid person on network television news at that time.
Closer to home, I have a new colleague to welcome. Barbara?
Thank you, Harry.
Having said all of that, she was paired with the late Harry Reasoner, and she and Harry did not hit it off at all. It was a disaster.
The decision was to welcome you as I would any respected and competent colleague of any sex. By noting that I've kept time on your stories and mine tonight, you owe me 4 minutes.
I have to shoot an arrow into Barbara Walters.
You mean you're making her fall in love with Harry Reasoner?
No. Harry just paid me to shoot her.
Just didn't care.
Stay away.
So following the disaster of the Barbara Walters-Harry Reasoner co-anchorship, Barbara nevertheless was determined to show that she was as tough a reporter as anybody else, and she came on this presidential trip, Jimmy Carter's trip around the world, one stop of which was in Tehran.
There was a big dinner dance for the Carters and many, many important people, but not Ted and Sam. We were on the outside waiting at the broadcast station for news. Barbara was invited, and Barbara danced with the Shah.
I'm quoting. Your Majesty. In a man's life, women count only if they are beautiful, graceful, and know how to stay feminine. You may be equal in the eyes of the law, but not in ability. You have never produced a Michelangelo or a Bach or even a great cook. You are schemers, you are evil, all of you. Oh, Your Majesty, you said all these things.
Not with the same words.
So you don't feel that women are in that sense equal, that they have the same intelligence or ability?
Not so far. Maybe you will become in the future.
And we may as well continue the trip because we went on to New Delhi, where she interviewed the then Prime Minister, a fellow by the name of Morarji Desai, who had a somewhat unusual health habit.
If you drink your own urine for 2 days, third day you will find the urine is without any color or any smell or any taste. It's pure water like this.
At dinner that night, we ordered a bottle of wine. And someone, maybe it was you, Ted, poured the wine and said, it's not a great urine, but it's an adequate urine. And Barbara chimed in and said, for a urine, it travels quite well. And I said, well, for a urine, the aroma leaves something to be desired, but it'll do. I love Barbara for it. If you and I were going to make fools of ourselves, she wasn't going to be left behind.
And then she said, can I use that on the air? And Sam and I, as I recall, were unanimous and adamant in saying, Barbara, no way. It's a dinner time news program, and you cannot use it. And Barbara did not use it. P.S. A few weeks later, a fellow by the name of Dan Rather went out to New Delhi, interviewed Morarji Desai, and what do you think headlined 60 Minutes that week? You got it, the urine story.
Desai indulges in what to most people, West and East, is a repugnant habit. He drinks his own urine.
Barbara never complained, not once. For so many years, it was really unacceptable, the notion that a woman could succeed in the same way that a man had in broadcast news. You've lived a good part of that, but just reflect a little on Barbara's role in fighting those battles, and fight them she did.
I had the privilege of interviewing Barbara and her daughter. It was Barbara's decision to choose me to do a sensitive story. She and her daughter had a fraught relationship. At the time of the story, they were great. She looked at me during that interview and remarked that I was the one that had it all. I had a career, I had 3 children, I had, a family and a career. And I think she felt that as a mother, she struggled and failed sometimes. That was the cost of the career that she invented. She did things no woman was supposed to be able to do. But being a mother and having her career would wait for a different generation.
Are there times when I look at people, I have a friend, for example, who's got 4 children and 11 grandchildren, and we take walks through the parks, and she says, look at your life. And I say, yeah, I've got all those pictures on the wall that are turning yellow. And I said, look at your life. I mean, how rich you are. 4 children, 11 grandchildren, that's richness. But I don't have that. I didn't take that path. I don't know whether I could have taken that path.
That was back in 2004. Barbara was just about to turn 75, and this was supposed to be her retirement interview. Well, the fact of the matter is that some years earlier, back in '97, she had launched a little lifeboat of her own. It was a program by women, for women, called The View. Barbara was the producer, the creator, and of course, the star of that program. And it became, over the years, and remains to this day, one of the most influential programs on television, created by one of the most important people ever to appear on television, Barbara Walters.